So today we're going to continue with lesson 5.5. Okay, so from 5.5 yesterday we learned how you factor this. X to the 6th minus 64w cubed. Very first step, you look to see if there's something in common. Is there something in common with the two? No, so now we look to see, is that the difference of two squares? No, because the w cubed. So now we look to see, is this the difference of two cubes? And in order to determine if x to the 6th is a cube, you basically divide the exponent by 3. That's all you do. So if I divide 6 by 3, what do I get? X to the 2nd. So that, in fact, is a perfect cube. Is 64 a perfect cube? Yep. What is cubed to give me 64? Try again. 4. Is w cubed a perfect cube? Yeah, what is cubed to give me w cubed? W. Once again, if you're stuck, take the exponent, divide it by 3. That's your key. So now if you remember, that's row 1. What would I do to row 2? I would square it. So I would square x squared, in which case what do I get? X to the 4th. Now I'm going to square 4w, in which case what do I get? 16w squared. So now if you remember, I jumped to two quantities. I had a small quantity and I had a big quantity. What goes into small quantity? What row? First row. So x squared and 4w. Now the question is, what is the sign between the two? Minus. And the reason why it's minus is because it matches whatever you start with. What comes first here? X to the 4th. What sign will I have? Plus, because remember, it's always opposite whatever your first sign was. What goes in the middle here? X squared times 4w. That's row 1. What is the only number I haven't used? The 16w squared. And what is the sign of my last term always? Plus. The sign of my last term is always plus. Last thing, I need to multiply those two together, and then I'm done. So I have x squared minus 4w times x to the 4th plus
4x squared w
plus w squared. Nice job. So that's just kind of a review, and that was the difference of two cubes. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at a problem that's a little bit more in depth. It's not tough, it's just a little longer. And I'm going to let you go ahead and write that down. Ooh, look at that. Look at that. Okay, first of all, notice I've got 6 terms. I'm going to look at all the coefficients. Is there something that I can take out of 20, 16, 15, 8, 10, and 12? No. So then I'm going to look at my numbers. I have an Fy, an Fz, a Gy, an Hz, an Hy, and a Gz. I only have 2 Fs, 2 Gs, and 2 Hs. Okay, so that does me no good. How many Ys do I have? 3. How many Zs? So let's put the y's together and let's put the z's together, kind of like we did in that example we ended with yesterday. So I'm going to put all the y's together. So I've got 20 fy plus 15 gy minus 10 hy. So all the y's are together. Now I'm going to put the z's. Minus 16 fz plus, minus 12 gz plus 8 hz. Okay, I'm going to group them. So let's group them in 2s. I'm also going to go ahead and make sure that that negative goes inside. What is in common with the first 3? 5y. Good, you caught the 5. So then that leaves me with 4f plus 3g minus 2h. What is in common with the next three?
4.
Okay, -4. I'm going to take out a -4z. So when I take that -4 from -16, what am I left with? 4f plus 3g, good, minus 2h. Oh, and then what do you notice? The parentheses are the same, which is exactly what we wanted to have happen. So the parentheses are one factor. What's your other factor going to be?
5y minus 4z.
5y minus 4z. Nice job. Okay. Remember the 5y minus 4z, if you didn't catch that? The 5y minus 4z comes from right here. Alrighty, let's look at another one and see what we got. Okay. Now, this says write each expression in quadratic form if possible. So the question is, well, what exactly is quadratic form? So right up here, I have a definition of quadratic form. Quadratic form is an expression that can be written as AU squared plus BU plus C for any numbers, A, B, and C. A cannot equal 0. Where U is some expression. Okay. So, example, I have, in this case, 12x squared plus 8x squared plus 1. All right, if you take a 2 out, 2x cubed, okay, and you square it, that's what you end up getting. You will see quadratic expressions written like this. Okay, notice you have an x to the 4th and an x squared. Here would be another one, x to the 6th plus 2x cubed plus 1 equals 0. Basically, this is the way to tell. Whatever term is in the middle, okay, the highest power has to be double that term. Whatever term is in the middle, the highest power has to be double that term. So real quick, if I had a, let's just say if I had a 3x to the 6th in the middle, okay, if I had a 3x to the 6th in the middle, what would have to be my leading term here? X to the 12th. So that would be a quadratic. Okay, that is in quadratic form. The highest power is always double the middle power. So is this in quadratic form? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so we need to write this in quadratic form. Now when they say write this expression in quadratic form, what I'm going to want to do is write it as something squared plus something plus something. Okay, so I have to think about that. So really, this is 150, okay, n to the 4th squared, all right, because that's something squared, plus 40 n to the 4th minus 15. So I can write that in quadratic form. Basically what you're doing is you're just taking that highest power and you're putting it as a quantity and you're squaring it. Not too difficult. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and look at this one. Write this in quadratic form if possible. Can you write that in quadratic form, yes or no?
No.
No. So this one you can't do. Okay, so we could put, in this case, no solution, or you could put not factorable. What about the bottom one? What is it going to be?
8x squared.
Yep, 8x squared squared plus 12x squared plus 18. Now your book does this a little different because what they actually do is they like take a number out of the 8 and a number out of the 12. We're not doing that because the way we factor, all right, we need the 8 there. Okay, we got to have the 8 there in order for us to factor the way we do. So, all right, so now the question is, how do we solve that? So now what they're doing is, they're saying, okay, if it's in quadratic form, now we want you to solve it. So is this in quadratic form, yes or no? Yes. So now quadratic form, remember, the middle term is x squared, right? So in order for it to be in quadratic term, our highest power has to be double that. So now we're going to do this in the exact same way we did before. First of all, we see if we can take anything out. Can we take anything out? A 3. Yep. So I'm going to divide everything by a 3. Oh, why did I write 6? Try again. Yeah, we're dividing by 3, but somehow I'm going to write divided by 6. Okay, let's try that one again. Divide by 3, 3, 3, 3. So I end up having 6x to the 4th minus 7x squared plus 1. So now if you remember, if it was in quadratic and we didn't have a 1 here, do you remember what we would do to factor that?
Times the first
Yep.
and last.
Times the first and the last. So I'm looking for two factors of 6 that add up to 7. What are they? 6 and 1. They have to be both negative. So now if you remember, this is one of those long ones. So I have to write 6x to the 4th minus 6x squared minus 1x squared plus 1 equals 0. What would we do now?
The first.
Yep. First ones and the last ones. Remember, we group them. So anything over 3 you always group. And that's kind of what we did today. So what can you take out from the first bunch? 6x squared. Good. What does that leave me with?
X squared minus 1.
Perfect. What can you take out from the next bunch?
Negative.
Good. And so then that leaves me with x squared minus 1. What are my two quantities going to be?
6x squared minus 1
Yep.
times x squared.
Good. And so 6x squared minus 1 times x squared minus 1. And so this looks very familiar to what we did before. The only difference is that instead of it being an x, it's now an x squared. So potentially on these problems, I'm going to have 4 answers. Or at least on this one, because it's an x to the 4th. And so first of all, my first equation, 6x squared minus 1 equals 0. Or x squared minus 1 equals 0. So first of all, how do I solve the 6x squared minus 1 equals 0? I do what?
Plus 1.
Add 1. So I end up having 6x squared equals 1, right? Then what do I do? X squared equals 1/6. Good. Got to divide by that 6 first. And then now what would you do? Square root. Yep. What's the important thing to remember about square root?
Plus or minus.
So plus or minus square root of 1/6. I'll let you leave that for now. Okay. Let's work down the next one. Next one, what do you get? X squared equals 1. So what does x equal? Plus or minus square root of 1. But what do we know plus or minus square root of 1 is? Plus or minus 1. So like I said, I will go ahead and let you answer the square root. Eventually we will simplify those down, but for right now I'm concerned that you can factor this. And it looks like we've got probably 1 or 2 more problems. Let's see what we got here. Ah, there we go. We gotta try another one. Sorry. So, is this a quadratic, yes or no?
Yes.
Yep. So I have to take out the greatest common factor. Is there something I can take out of all 3?
No.
No, so I'm gonna go ahead and start. First times last, 2 factors of
12.
that add up to 8. What are they? 2 factors of 12 that add up to 8.
Negative 6 and negative 2.
Yep, 6 and 2, both are negative because you have to get negative 8. Good. Rewriting it, you have 4x to the 4th minus 6x squared minus 2x squared plus 3 equals 0.
Why'd you do that?
because your middle term here is x squared. And remember, we're just rewriting that middle term using -6 and -2. So what can you take out from the first bunch? 2x squared, nice. That leaves me with?
2x squared.
Yep, -3. Good job. What can you take out from the next? -1, yep. Why do we want to take out a -1? Yep, to make them match. Okay, if we would have taken out that -1, they would have matched and we would have ended up having to go back and do it anyway. So my two quantities are?
2x squared minus 1
Yep,
times 2x squared times 2.
good. And that's going to equal 0. Okay, so my two quantities, I've got 2x squared minus 1 equals 0, or 2x squared minus 3 equals 0. So I've got to solve them both.
X equals square root.
So 2x squared equals 1. So what does x squared equal? 1/2. Good. So x equals plus or minus root 1/2.
I always forget.
Gotta have the plus or minus. That'll even catch you up on the ACT too. What do you get here? 2x squared equals what? 3. So x squared equals 3 over 2. So what does x equal? Plus or minus 3/2. Now I want you to understand that these are not reduced answers. Okay, I want you to understand that you in fact can reduce these more and get rid of the square roots. But I'm not concerned with that. I'm concerned with the factoring here in the middle. Okay, so there actually is a few steps more that you need to do to simplify that. Okay, so anyway, if you remember, what I gave you yesterday was 20 through 25 all, 20 through 40, or 26 through 46 the evens. And yes, I do want you to keep that. So pages 346 through 347, you had numbers 20 through 25 all, 26 through 46 evens. Okay, so that is what you need to do for me for Tuesday.